In a world where two men decided they wanted to stir the pot in the AMC community, you have one hero, one wolf of my street, an ape, Ryan Rigg, who steps in to speak out about the belligerent freaking nonsense that's taking place with Wall Street cynic and Charles Gasparino, baby. Oh my freaking guys, we have got a freaking monster story to be able to tell you. Oh my, I can't believe this is even happening in real time. What is up, everybody? Welcome to Trace Trades, where we freaking talk fast and don't skip class. I like to preface by saying that I'm not a financial advisor or expert, so take what I say with a grain of salt. Let's get into the video. So today, my friends, my family, my fellow Gorilla Gang, I want to tell you about something that's been taking place here in the last 24 hours in the Twitter sphere, because this is actually pretty freaking fascinating. You've got two main characters in this plot, Charles Gasparino as well as James Chanos. The same James Chanos, the billionaire James Chanos, who is the owner of Kynikos firm. Now, this is actually pretty fascinating stuff, and I want to show you this here really quick before we get into the details. But you have two people, Wall Street Cynic, which, by the way, the handle itself, right off the bat, should tell you everything you need to know about the way that this guy makes money in the market, and Charles Gasparino, who put out a picture, says this: source of mine has happened to be taking in a movie at an AMC theater in NYC. I know he was not early, and the apes accuse others of manipulating stocks. SMH. Well, it's fascinating to me that you say the apes accuse others of manipulating stocks, but then you put out stuff like this with an obvious conflict of interest in disapproval of AMC. But hey, to each their own. But this is, I just say expected behavior from Charles. Whatever. People know that he likes to go on the internet and troll the apes, even if they present factual information in terms of revenue, in terms of stock movement, in terms of disproving statements that he's made that, to be completely blunt, are sometimes false, right? I expect that out of him. This guy is a new player. I've never seen Wall Street Cynic active and speaking out in terms of what's happening in the AMC community, mostly because his Twitter kind of flies under the radar. This brings me to the beginning of this information is, who is James Chanos, right? Well, we know he's the owner of Kynikos Associates, but how do we know he's tied to this Twitter account? Well, lucky for the apes out here, which, by the way, a lot of this information in the video was saved in terms of time, and it was organized very well because of this man, Wolf of My Street, at Ryan_Rigg, who is actively covering everything that's happening here right now. So if you want to check him out, feel free to do so. But anywho, what we found is this: Kynikos is actually actively tied to this Twitter account. And the way that we know this, why is this not popping up? Oh, it's right here. So the way that we know this is because there's an SEC legally binding document that states it. Now let's just check this out at Wall Street Cynic. You can see it right here, twitter.com/Wall Street Cynic, Kynikos.com. This is for Kynikos Associates LP. And we just spoke about how Jim Chanos is literally the president and founder of Kynikos Associates as a New York registered investment advisor focused on short selling. Okay. All right. So now we know who this player is. We know where he kind of lies in terms of Twitter. It's interesting to me that he'd come out and post this picture, mostly because his name's not tied to it. You'd have to dig into this SEC document. You'd have to know beforehand that, hey, this is James Chanos, because it doesn't really say it on his Twitter account, right? You look at this. It says Diogenes. It says at Wall Street Cynic, searching for honesty on the street. Doesn't say his name. You don't know that. Well, there's problems here, and I'm going to point these out to you. You've got ties to AMC stock. You've got conflict of interest. Very strange behavior. From a psychological perspective, I'm actually fascinated by the way that this works. And then you also have a prepared statement from James Chanos, Thanos, baby, that I want to talk about after we get into that stuff. I don't want to talk about Charles Gasparino a little bit, but mostly I want to focus on James Chanos. So we know that he has ties to AMC stock, but most importantly is that he has a very firm stance on short selling. In fact, he's went in front of some big boys in the past, back in 2003, to make statements about hedge fund strategies and market participation regarding short selling. Now, he said this, and I find this to be the most interesting piece. As I've outlined above, short selling is already a heavily regulated strategy with significant legal and economic constraints. I would disagree. I think there's more things that can be done differently, but that's a whole different freaking video. Strong capital markets in the U.S. require a robust short side. Restrictions on short selling impede the market's efficiency and decrease the amount of independent research necessary to mitigate against irrational exuberance and outright fraud. This is the most interesting piece. Short selling represents only a very small fraction of market activity. It is very costly and full of risk for the short seller to execute and maintain a position, waiting for the rest of the market to realize the stock is overvalued. I think this piece is interesting. Waiting for the rest of the market to realize the stock is overvalued. What? Okay. I think if you short sell a stock, same as if you go long on a stock, you run the risk of getting squeezed out. That's part of it, right? That's how it works. In the same way that long positions, buyers run the risk of short sellers trying to push the stock price down based on their own freaking claims that they make, like you see happening right now, literally with James Chanos. Now that we've seen this, we've seen his stance on short selling, we've kind of covered the fact that that's how he makes his money, which, by the way, is a very significant amount. It's $1.5 billion of net worth for this guy. How is he tied to AMC stock? Why is it important that he made this statement? Why is it so freaking honestly absurd that it's happening? He has made public statements on his stance of AMC stock. In and of itself, that's not a problem, right? You can come out and say, hey, I think it's overvalued because of XYZ reasons. I don't agree with you. I think you're missing the point here, but you get what I'm saying. He also has released this Twitter of that AMC empty theater. Now, why is this problematic? Well, I'll show you why it's problematic. It's because Jim Chanos is short on the stock. Jim Chanos shorted AMC. How do you accumulate his billions of dollars? He's got this public stance, right? He thinks it's overvalued. The fundamentals have gotten worse, which I also disagree with. You can look at the numbers and see that they are actually, in fact, improving. But this is problematic because it represents conflict of interest. He can move markets. This guy is worth $1.5 billion. He's the president and founder of literally a firm. That's what he does. He makes money by shorting stocks. So for him to come out on Twitter, albeit somewhat anonymously, and try and move the stock and change sentiment based on his own personal beliefs, I don't know about that. I believe in presenting facts. You can come out and say, hey, I think that the stock is overvalued, whatever. That's fine. But the stance that he's taking, mostly from a psychological perspective, is what really intrigues me. So we know that he's got this short selling firm. We know his stance on AMC. We know that he's bashing the stock to some extent, even though he has this conflict of interest. He's literally short on the freaking stock, my friends. But his behavior is what fascinates me the most. Now, I want to talk about the behavior piece because I don't think it should be worth his time to be responding to people on Twitter. This guy is the president of literally a firm. He's worth $1.5 billion, and he's going and replying to people on Twitter with some sort of response to the picture that he ended up putting out. He's blocking accounts. He requested a public apology from the man who essentially brought this whole situation up. Now, you can't make this shit up, guys. This is really freaking wild stuff. Now, look at this. Tweets and replies. Check this out. So Charles won't respond to me publicly. This is Wolf of My Street, and I now have Jim Chanos in my DMs asking for an apology using the Wall Street Cynic account. He also attached the alleged ticket stub, which was never the issue at hand. Why did Jim DM Charles the empty theater photo anyways? This is wild. Can I expect a public apology? Charlie Gasparino's post included the timestamp from a separate DM he sent me on Thursday morning. My son sent me that photo at 12:50 p.m. yesterday, August 14th. He went out of his way to reply to this guy, saying, hey, I expect an apology for what ended up happening here. He also showed a picture, essentially a stub of, hey, look, I was at this movie, I was at Free Guy, whatever. The issue at hand isn't the fact that he posted a picture in and of itself. It's the conflict of interest behind the picture, the intent behind the picture. This guy has a very obvious conflict of interest, my friends. I mean, you can't make that any more clear than that, right? So that's just one piece. There's a couple other things too. He's blocking accounts, right? Check this out. Diogenes blocked many people, Wolf of My Street being one of them. He's also going out of his way to ask for this. God dang it, hairball. Sorry about that. He's also going out of his way to ask for an apology, and he's also replying to people on Twitter. This is a ruse. This is a ruse setup, is a false statement, right? He's trying to defend himself. Now, why would a guy try to defend a situation like this? This is a great analogy that I heard from TMI, the Mass Investor. And I think this is a very easy way to put it. If the wolf barks at the moon, nobody bats an eye. That's normal. That happens. But if the moon barks back at the wolf, people lose their minds because that's not something that ever happens. And that's what you have happening right here with James. It doesn't make sense. In this situation, he's got nothing to gain and only things to lose by engaging with people on Twitter, which is why I'm so fascinated by his behavior. The behavior to me speaks about someone who actually does have something to maybe not hide, but defend. And you shouldn't have anything to defend if you haven't done anything wrong. And I would say he's done something pretty freaking wrong. I mean, this guy's got a 1.5 billion. This is the problem for me. This is where I get pissed off. Truly, it's obvious that he has a conflict of interest. He has this Twitter account. He can remain anonymous if people don't know that he's tied to this Twitter account, and then come out and try and bash the stock and push it down, which, by the way, stock bashing, this technique of trying to scare people out of an investment based on your beliefs and based on spreading FUD, is an illegal practice. You can't do that. That's infiltration to a T. This is the exact sort of stuff that months ago I said I was worried about in terms of what could happen. I'm so glad people freaking didn't buy into this nonsense and caught it this quick. I mean, this dude is a freaking genius. What the heck is that? Oh, it's my chair rubbing against my mic. Sorry about that. But the behavior behind this is not somebody that's trying to be transparent per se. It's something that shouldn't have even happened to begin with, because this is conflict of interest. It's the whole. Let me think of the best way to put this. The issue at hand is that this guy is not in a seat to be able to do that. Like Adam Aaron, for example, CEO of a company. He can do things, he can't do things. There are certain things that as a CEO of a company, you're not allowed to do. This should be one of them. As the president of Kynacos, you should not be able to go on Twitter and hide anonymously behind a freaking Twitter handle and trash talk with people. I mean, this is nuts. Check this out. I want to come back to his actual Twitter account. And I'm going to show you some of his tweets and replies. Check this out right here. Hey, Wall Street Cynic, we appreciate you showing your cards and your son's support at the box office. Looks like partly due to him, Free Guy overachieved. Hollywood is just hitting its recovery stride as it moves into a heavy pipeline of blockbusters after an expected slow start. Congratulations. But this weekend's box office of $75 million was still down almost 40% from 2019's comparable $120 million. This was already addressed. He's not saying anything factually incorrect, I should say. And he goes on. This conversation continues. He's engaging with just regular everyday people like you and me over something that literally is not worth engaging over, because he's not going to change anybody's minds and they're not going to change his mind. What's the point? This keeps me going on my point of this is the moon barking at the wolf. Theaters are not 100% capacity. He continues to engage. You can see this strange behavior. Doesn't this just raise some red flags for you guys? Like, at first, he put out the picture, whatever, but he continued. The continuation is where I'm starting to raise an eyebrow, because Charles Gasparino, whatever. I expect this out of this freaking silly chicken. This guy goes out of his way to make these sort of claims, which I'm not done with him either. I want to talk about this guy too, but it's very obvious. There's no more I can say in terms of the conflict of interest of having a short position and going out of your way to bash a stock and try and change people out of the AMC community, but after they made their own financial responsibility and decision, right? They've made that decision for themselves. That's not for you to change. It's not anybody's place to change their decision unless there's money on the line. People only care. These big dudes, they only care about what you do with your money if it affects their money. That's it. That's it. I mean, that's exactly what you're watching happen right now. This is where I think more regulation needs to be happening. Now, I want to talk about Charles Gasparino, Fox Business Network, right? If you're not familiar with him, very firm stance in not liking AMC, but he also likes Robinhood. And this is an example that I want to get into here a little bit, because he actually ran with a story here a little bit to make Robinhood move. I firmly believe Robinhood moved. It's this. Robinhood gets boost as Congress declines ban for now on sales tactic. And this ban, quote unquote, was on payment for order flow. Now, I don't want anybody to get this twisted, so I pulled this up. The bill itself. This bill was proposing a study be done on payment for order flow. Not necessarily that they would ban it entirely, which would be freaking awesome, but that's a different story, right? What they did was twist words a little bit, which you have seen happen more than once. And note the author, by the way, Charles Gasparino, in order to have a favored position on the stock. Robinhood. What ended up happening? Well, Robinhood went up that day. Robinhood was up like 5% overall in that certain move. He proposed, hey, look, this bill to ban payment for order flow is the reason. What are you doing, buddy? Is the reason that the stock didn't end up, the stock went up on that day. But the bill never had anything to do with banning payment for order flow. To require the Securities and Exchange Commission to carry out a study on payment for order flow, to require the investor advocate of the commission to provide recommendations on payment for order flow and for other purposes. They twisted the words here a little bit, which is just, another scenario where you have the exact same thing happening back to back to back to back, where people will twist information to try and move a stock, right? And in this instance, it's not stock bashing, but market manipulation and market movement is not as simple as just computers moving stocks. It's not as simple as high frequency trading, naked short selling, failure delivers. It's real players behind the game doing stuff like this to move stocks, because this news article focused on a payment for order flow ban denial was incorrect. That's not what it was. It was never about that. It was about investigating payment for order flow to maybe move into that. And as we know, Robinhood makes a vast majority of their income based on payment for order flow, so it went up that day. He also has consistent banter and jabbing at AMC stock. He also replied to this empty theater sort of situation, which, by the way, this isn't even relevant. This isn't important because the picture in and of itself is the problem, not necessarily that it was empty. But check this out. I want to show you the actual picture. Check this out. These seats, black seats, blue lighting, whatever. You look up AMC. AMC theater interior. AMC, god dang it. I have never been to an AMC theater that looks even remotely like that. The seats are always red. That's the thing. I mean, the logo is red. That's literally their trademark, is the red, comfortable lounge seats, because it's an AMC theater. But that's a whole different subject. Whatever. We can get into that in a different point in time. But you can see these two players essentially having some sort of position on the stock and a way that they feel about how the company, the stock trades, whatever. But I want to connect some dots. What are the issues? What are the connections between these guys? Charles and James have had previous relationships and interaction, both with sizable power and conflict of interest. And this is the kind of the takeaway from the story that I want to get into here. The statements came from James on improper news reporting and ties with Charles. And that's regarding this news article focused on payment for order flow ban denial. So I want to show you this. This is actually pretty fascinating. Let me switch this back over to my monitor and read you this statement. So this came directly from James. It says this: Gasparino calls to say that he doesn't think Chanos could have talking about him, although he does admit that he was the person who did all the reporting on Lehman for CNBC. Essentially what this story is talking about is some misreporting, quote unquote, that ended up hurting James and his short selling firm. And he came back to say this. This is James. Actually, trading on or inducing others to trade on information you know to be false is a crime. The securities fraud and is a criminal, not civil offense. Now, this came directly from the man himself. He recognizes legal implications behind some of the things that take place within news reporting, within talking about stocks. But get this guy, and as well as freaking Charles Gasparino, go out of their way to twist things and make a picture that fits their narrative and their own position in the stock. I mean, you literally can't make this stuff up. Look at this. Robinhood gets boost as Congress declines ban. Never happened. You also have this freaking picture coming out by the man himself, Diogenes Wall Street cynic, talking about how he thinks AMC's overvalued. Look, I mean, you've got a million freaking articles out here. Jim Chanos says AMC Entertainment's fundamentals have gotten worse. He's got a short position in the stock. He's a billionaire. This guy is not in a position to be able to do this stuff. When you do certain things in life, there are just certain paths you cannot walk down. You can't walk down this path. This is not something that you can do as a president of a firm focused on short selling, literally coming onto the internet and trying to troll people over a stock that literally doesn't even, I guess it does affect him. So you get the point. Guys, holy crap. I mean, this is just crazy. Look at this. You'd think this is a freaking movie. Oh, man. I just wanted to take the time to be able to walk you through what I thought was some pretty interesting drama on Twitter this weekend, and remind you to be diligent, to pay attention to what people say on the internet, and try and fact check stuff, because infiltration remains my greatest concern within AMC, within the ape community, and it's the idea of outside players trying to come in and sway your opinion on a stock to affect the stock price. That's the greatest weapon that I think these guys have. And this is an example, 2 examples of it happening in real time. So I just wanted to take the time to be able to kind of talk about the story in case you weren't able to catch it, and hopefully pull some value away from that. So I'll put out an update video here in the morning tomorrow. If you want to check that out, feel free to do so. Otherwise, blah, blah, blah. No spill, drop like, catch you on the next one. Like taps always. Much love and peace.